Hello everyone. This month we continue our class refresh series by digging into Pantheon Rise of the Fallen's Rogue class. If you haven't checked in recently, you can look back at our previous class refreshes on the Dire Lord and Shaman classes via our YouTube channel, or even by navigating to their updated class pages and watching the videos at the bottom of the breakdowns on PantheonMMO.com. As we have done previously, we'll be breaking down the 1 to 10 experience for the Rogue class and giving an idea of what you can expect from Terminus's resident Shadow Walker. So let's get to it. To begin with, the Rogue will use a few different resources to dispatch of their enemies in combat. First, readiness, similar to most classes, will build up to allow rogues to use various weapon techniques or abilities that are special to the rogue around these different weapon types. Rogues will also use a system called Opportunity, which can be earned through various methods of gathering anywhere from 0 to 4 opportunity in various ways. You'll see these resources mentioned as we talk through the various abilities. It's also important to note that the Rogue is one of the few classes that will begin the game with dual wield, which is essential to their toolkit. Outside of the basic weapon techniques that all classes will start with, the Rogue's first class-specific ability is Blackjack Kick. Now, Blackjack Kick does not actually have a cost. Instead, it is navigated by a 15-second cooldown. It is an instant attack and deals 100% weapon damage as physical damage to an enemy, while also granting 1 opportunity. Now, what's nice to know here is that it grants 2 opportunity when executed from a target's side. So not only is this a solid option to deal damage, but a way to build up your opportunity resource to combo in various other attacks. Next up, at level 2, is Bloodletter. This will actually cost 1 opportunity and have a 30-second cooldown. This lacerates the target, dealing 120% weapon damage and inflicting bleeding, dealing 50% of the damage dealt as physical damage every 3 seconds for 15 seconds. It's also important to note that Bloodletter cannot critically hit. At this point, Bloodletter will obviously combo directly with Blackjack Kick. However, at level 3, a rogue player will feel much more in control of their opportunity as their signature ability, Shadow Walk, is introduced. Shadow Walk is able to be toggled on and off and allows the rogue to walk in the shadows, making it hard for most enemies to detect you by sight or sound. While shadow walking, you'll generate 1 opportunity and 250 readiness every 2 seconds, and your movement speed is reduced by 40%. It goes without saying that Shadow Walk is perhaps the most important signature ability of the rogue, and allows the player not only to traverse the dangerous world of Terminus in a way that no other class can, but it directly puts valuable resources at the tips of the player's fingers to plan upcoming fights with both readiness and opportunity spend. This ensures the rogue will always enter combat at an advantage, and this is further proven with the ability Sinister Strikes, which is granted at level 4. Sinister Strikes will also cost 1 opportunity with a 30-second cooldown. It will consume all the opportunity points that you have to activate it, and while active, the damage of your combat techniques are increased by 15% for each of those opportunity points that are consumed. Now, using a combat technique will immediately end Sinister Strikes, unless that technique is used while Shadow Walk is active. So this ability gives the rogue, who begins combat most of the times from the shadows, a very strong burst of damage, and also gives them a chance to strike twice with an empowered technique, one such as Shiv, a basic dagger technique, once to start from stealth, but again before the 15 seconds runs out. Watch your threat, however, my fellow rogue friends. At level 5, the rogue's ability line begins to introduce support with an ability, Springwire Trap. This also costs 1 opportunity, has a 30-second cooldown, and places a trap for 60 seconds that will coil around the feet of the first enemy to approach, rooting them in place for 60 seconds. Damage dealt will break the root effect. Now, this does require stealth to lay down, and you may only have 2 traps active at the same time. While the rogue player can already be strategic on when to engage and how to set up their engagement roles with enemies, this allows the rogue to plan for potential setup of group pulls and further assist with scouting ahead via Shadow Walk. A rogue isn't just a greedy group member who pumps out damage, but now can be a strategic asset in planning what's ahead. Next up at level 6, the rogue will get Umbral Edge. Umbral Edge will take 1000 readiness and has a 5-second cooldown. Now this is a technique, and it deals anywhere between 100 to 200% weapon damage to the target, but also reduces its accuracy by 10% for 24 seconds. This will allow another strong damage ability, but also assist the group with accuracy reduction on the target, adding to the utility side of the rogue's toolkit. At level 7, the rogue will receive its second trap, this time, Explosive Trap. This also costs 1 opportunity, and you place a trap that will explode when the enemy approaches, dealing fire damage to the target. Obviously, just like your previous trap, it requires stealth, and you may only have 2 active traps at once. While this is not a utility trap, the rogue adds to his damage and again sets up for an explosive engagement scenario with incoming enemies. Level 8 is a significant level for growing your young rogue, as you will receive 4 total abilities, all of which have large impact. But let's start with their utility offering, Caltrops. So Caltrops is 1 opportunity to scatter Caltrops at the target's location for 30 seconds, and in this all enemies will have their movement speed reduced by 75% while stepping on the Caltrops. In Pantheon, an enemy that begins to flee a losing battle can cause disastrous results for your party. Nothing can overwhelm you more than when an enemy who finds a way to reach his friends and allies and brings them into the fight. Caltrops will negate and heavily slow an enemy attempting to run, so your group can safely dispatch them. However, it's important to note that a rogue who goes too hard on damage could be stuck without the opportunity needed when your foe begins to flee. Next up, the rogue will be introduced to Toxin Craft. This does not have a cost and is a 5-second cast time. The rogue will create 5 vials of synthetic toxin. Applying this toxin to your primary weapon will give it a chance to deal additional chemical damage to an enemy. This generated stack of poison can be added to both your main hand and offhand weapons, adding to all the damage a rogue dishes out. A highly impactful offering, but the other 2 abilities the rogue receives at level 8 in Backstab and Waylay may end up being the favorites of rogues, as they offer 2 ways to deal massive damage. Let's start with Backstab. Backstab is a general technique that takes 1000 readiness. It deals 300% weapon damage. Now you must be behind your target, and it does require a piercing weapon. Now with that said, are you a rogue that doesn't always use daggers? Because that's where Waylay will come into play. This is a general technique very similarly that deals 300% weapon damage. You must be behind your target, but this requires a blunt or slashing weapon. While at the start, these abilities will function the same way to allow rogues of various weapon loadouts to perform, expect them to grow in functionality as the rogue grows in tandem. At level 9, the rogue will receive its second debuff, which will help the group in Corrosive Brew. Now this takes 2 opportunity and has a 1-second cooldown. Throw a flask of corrosive toxins at the target, reducing armor class by 15 for 5 minutes. Now finally, at level 10, the rogue will receive a passive ability, which will need to be slotted on their utility bar, and a support ability that'll aid in the group in a tremendous way. Now let's start with their passive ability, Ambidextrous. Ambidextrous has no costs and again just needs to be slotted on your utility bar. You gain bonuses based on your offhand weapon type. With a piercing weapon in your offhand, you will increase your haste by 5%. A slashing weapon in your offhand reduces the offhand damage penalty by 10%. And finally, a blunt weapon grants offhand attacks a 5% chance to stun for 1 second. This gives the rogue options on how they will play the various weapon types, and also options on which stats and gear will support them most. This means rogues will have various options in living out their class fantasy. But finally, let's talk about Smoke Trick. Smoke Trick costs 3 opportunity and has a 20-second cooldown. You throw a vial at the enemy's feet that releases mesmerizing toxins, incapacitating them for up to 18 seconds. Any damage done to the target while mesmerized will break the effect. Now duration can be increased by 50% against disoriented targets. This also requires stealth, and if used while the target is stunned by flash bomb, the target will also lose all threat against the rogue. No enchanter in the group? A rogue can flex in important moments when prepared to keep a couple enemies locked down. Of course, at a cost, as a rogue can stay stealth to lock down the target, but this means they will not be part of dwindling down the enemy's HP. So weighing the cost becomes important to the group. A level 10 rogue should be full of tricks, no pun intended, whether it's exploding from the shadows with heavy damage, debuffing a target to help the group, or just scouting ahead for the group in a dangerous world. The rogue has a lot of tools at their disposal in their 1 through 10 experience. Now we hope you've enjoyed this look at Pantheon's rogue class, and be sure to check out its refreshed class page on pantheonmmo.com, as well as the shaman and dire lord we covered in previous months.